All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another broadcast. You are listening to Hardcore Harry, and I am Death to the New World Order. Some of you may not know that song was actually called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, and that's going to be the topic of tonight's broadcast, and it's not going to actually be what you think it is. You know, I have always had this general assumption of what a silent weapon for a quiet war is, but last night I looked into it a little bit further. It doesn't really, there's probably a lot of silent weapons for a lot of different fronts on this quiet war against the New World Order, but it started not having to do with poisoning the food, the air, the water, Codex Alimentarius, Agenda 21, go on down the list. Had nothing to do with any of that. And I shouldn't get ahead of myself, but I'm kind of the person that's got to spoil the end of the movie. It had more to do with control through the monetary system, and it really came to fruition as the technology was developed in the realm of computers that caused the New World Order to say, well, wait a minute. Now that we've got these computers, these massive relay computers, these vacuum tube computers, of course, later the transistor computers, and eventually the integrated circuits. But clean back 1953, with their clickety-clackety relay computers, they said, I think that we can control the economy, control the money, control the finances to such an extreme degree that we can wage war. Now, usually when you read something that is pretty much government documentation, you don't expect things to be spelled out as blatantly as you're about to see tonight. But in this case, it is, very much so. And I actually, first I want to go over, I found out my sister is subscribing to Time magazine. I was very disappointed when I went over there and found that out. But I found out because they actually presented, I guess it's one of, if not the most recent, let me turn my volume down a little bit and get the mic closer so you get less echo off of the walls. One of the most recent issues. So we're just going to go over a couple of issues here. What's this? Mark Rubio. I think I can hold that so you don't get the reflection. Marco Rubio wants to censor the internet. That's state propaganda. Get it through your head. And who's Times Person of the Year? Surprise, surprise, surprise. Times Person of the Year. Your dictator. Again, propaganda, state propaganda. And let's put a big old pill on the cover as we're trying to sedate and dumb everyone down. I'm not going to go into the psychology of this, but it's pretty obvious for those of you who are awake. And then the most recent one, of course, I could never go without mentioning Rise of the Drones. Rise of the Drones on Time magazine with a Predator drone over top an American home. And people see this, and actually I think I might go into this a little bit more detail after I have time to check it out, really read it, and because there's a lot more in there than what you see on the cover. Drones are being normalized. You're being adapted to accept it. All right, I've explained cognitive dissonance before. If they want to, for instance, take away your guns, they can't just come and take away your guns. The people will fight. They'll rise up. They'll resist, and they won't allow it. So you have to introduce the concept that you're going to take their guns over and over and over and not do it. Day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year, you have to scare the people into thinking you're going to take their guns and not do it. The human mind is incapable of maintaining rage for a prolonged period of time. It's just a psychological fact. Humans cannot maintain rage for a prolonged period of time. And if they can't change something, that's what anger is for. That's what rage is for. Something's wrong, you get angry about it, and you change it. I probably shouldn't do this, and I probably shouldn't say it. But I'll give you an example. My wife doesn't do the dishes. And she doesn't do the dishes for a prolonged period of time. Well, what happens? I get angry. And I say, do the fucking dishes. And what happens? She does the dishes. So that anger served a purpose. The dishes got done. That's what anger is for. And the New World Order controlling you knows this. And they know that if they just say, we're going to take the guns, and they come to take them, you will be angry and you will react. So their goal is to constantly make you angry and give you nothing to react to. So your anger is fruitless. It's baseless. And they basically train you over time to not get angry when they say they're going to take your guns. By the time they take your guns, you won't even know they're doing it. If you knowed, you wouldn't even care because you're sick of hearing about it. Look, I lived in Florida. And I lived in Florida. We had a lot of hurricanes come through. I think it was 2005. We had 3 hurricanes come through. And I was in Jacksonville, Florida. The first 2 were like heading directly at Jacksonville, Florida, and then curved off at the last second. So you're seeing this played up in the mainstream media. I mean, they're just like, oh, well, just coming off the coast of Africa, we've got this little thing here that might turn into a hurricane. And at that point in time, you're like, I better keep an eye on that. And then day after day, it's closer and closer and closer and closer and closer. Next thing you know, it's only 300 miles away, and they're saying it's probably going to hit your city. People are freaking out, running to the store, buying canned goods, putting all the gas in their car, fleeing the state, and then, it just misses, and it goes around. Another hurricane comes through, same thing, all over again. Weeks of fear-mongering. People freak out. They run to Pensacola, whatever. And it misses. Third one comes through, and I am sick and tired of hearing about hurricanes. I won't even turn on the news. I mean, to even think about it exhausts you. And in fact, even if you don't think about it, you're exhausted from all the stress, all the anxiety about the other 2 hurricanes that almost hit and went away. So what state are you in? You're completely and utterly vulnerable to the threat. And when the 3rd hurricane came through, and I believe it was called Hurricane Jean or Hurricane Jeannie, I don't remember. When the 3rd hurricane came through, I was on my couch sleeping in the middle of the day. I am not somebody who takes naps. I'm somebody who cannot even go to sleep when I go to bed at night. In fact, I got out of bed at 9 o'clock in the morning this morning to tell my wife to put the timber wolf outside because the wolves downstairs were fighting and I couldn't even think about falling asleep. 9 a.m. I'm still trying to fall asleep. I don't take naps. I sleep 5 or 6 times a week. I mean, literally, I take nights off. I can't sleep, so the only way I'm going to fall asleep is just to take tonight off. People think of taking a day of work off. I take a night of sleep off so that I can sleep the following night. I'm not a napper. But because of all that cognitive dissonance, again, the cognitive dissonance of the other 2 hurricanes that did not hit, when the 3rd hurricane hit, I was sound asleep on my couch taking a nap. And as I'm laying there sleeping, I felt the house shake. It woke me up. The house shook because the 3rd hurricane hit the city. The New World Order understands human psychology. They know what makes you tick. They understand cognitive dissonance. And this is why you have people like Alex Jones out there fear-mongering about the guns. They will not and they cannot take the guns at this point. They're working on the cognitive dissonance. They will eventually take them, of course, but not yet, because you're not worn down enough yet.
Truth Broadcast Network may contain copyrighted material, the use of which has not always been specifically authorized by the copyright owner. We make this available in our efforts to advance understanding of criminal justice, political, human rights, economic, scientific, and social justice issues. This constitutes a fair use of any such copyrighted material as provided for in Section 107 of the U.S. Copyright Law. In accordance with Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, the material on this site is distributed without profit to those who have expressed a prior interest in receiving the information.
And we are back, and despite all of our rage, we are just rats in a cage. That's what this cover is all about. Cognitive dissonance. They're not going to shoot you. They're not going to assassinate everybody with a drone tomorrow, but they're normalizing it. They're getting you past the state of becoming enraged by the fact that your government would dare fly an armed predator drone in your skies, over your city, over your home. That's what it depicts. It's over somebody's home. And I'll go more into the other parts, the other aspects of this, because there's all kinds of propaganda in here about the drones. And you're going to see more and more and more propaganda about the drones, but that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. Tonight, it is silent weapons for quiet wars, and this broadcast will be a little bit different in the sense that they're now blocking another YouTube channel. So I've got to go way out of my way to make sure that there's no song, no music, nothing that could ever possibly be copyrighted in any of the broadcasts, because they're looking for any excuse to block all of the broadcasts. Thusly, I don't know. I've got a bunch of videos lined up and I don't know what's in them. I'll just have to try and remember if there's any music that might be copyrighted. But in the meantime, we're going to go on screen and start examining the documentation. And here we have Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. An introduction programming manual. Now, fortunately, I happen to be a programmer. I learned computer programming when I was 14 years old. Let's zoom out so we can fit all the text in here. And I guess we should just go ahead and dive straight into the text. But we have it actually on another page. There we go. Get the text nice and big. Make sure everybody can see it. I want to make sure everyone sees the text so they understand. And I would have the actual pamphlet, because it was like a government pamphlet thing here, but I just didn't have time to find it for the broadcast. Move my audio settings off screen. The following document, dated May 1979, was found on July 7, 1986 in an IBM copier that had been purchased at a surplus sale. This was also printed in Bill Cooper's book, which I usually have here. Bill Cooper's book, Behold a Pale Horse, also has this document and many, many others inside of this book. They killed him for a reason. Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. Now, I've seen the cover of this pamphlet, and you can probably go to Google Images and put in Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars and find it, and it says Top Secret and Confidential on it, and you'll find out why in a moment. Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars Operations Research Technical Manual. Now, we're going to get a bit technical in this broadcast in the sense that it's going to get a little bit technical, and there may be pauses where we are thinking, trying to figure it out, because they've got diagrams almost like an electronic schematic, but I believe what they're looking at, what they're explaining is not, of course, the flow of electrons through an electrical circuit. It's the flow of money. It's the flow of money through an economy. That's the war they're fighting here. So, let's read the document here. Welcome aboard. This publication marks the 25th anniversary of the Third World War, called the Quiet War, being conducted using subjective biological warfare fought with silent weapons. If it was published in 79 and it's the 25th anniversary, that's 1954. It was published. Or I mean, the war started in 53, 54. So you're talking right as World War II ended, aren't you? I'm not a history professor. This book contains an introductory description of this war, its strategies, and its weaponry. May 79, number 74-1120. That is the document number. Security. It is, now this is important, listen to this. It is patently impossible to discuss social engineering or the automation of a society. Automation essentially refers to the robotic progression. Like, you are not a human, a flesh and blood human, you are an automaton. And it's why I said rats in the cage. We do the things we do. Well, look at Facebook. You got a like button. There's no unlike or dislike button, is there? So everybody's like feeding each other little pellets, like they're rats in cages. And they're doing the same thing here, but they're doing it with dollars. But I got to resist going too deep too soon. It is patently impossible to discuss social engineering or the automation of a society, i.e. the engineering of social automation systems. Silent weapons. So the silent weapon is the engineering of social automation. They're engineering society. And it's automatic. In other words, they determine what they want to happen. They tweak the system. And I hate to say it, but the sheeple make it happen. How many people... I don't want to go too far off track, but I have to. I have to explain this shit. Nobody's going to fucking understand it if I don't. How many people go to the bank and say, yes, I want to open up a fabric company and sell fabrics in this store over here. And what's the bank do? Oh, so you need $242,000 to get your building and buy your produce and get things up and running and pay your employees. We'll review the loan and we'll get back to you. And everybody operates under the false assumption that they're looking at this economically. Is this person going to be able to pay back the loan and so on? But I told you, when I bought this house, I had not 1 cent of debt on the face of the earth. And one of the banks denied me the loan because I didn't have enough debt. So it's not based on whether or not you can pay it back, is it? And of course, it can be based on different things at different times for different reasons. But when we're talking about social engineering, who controls the banks? The New World Order. So they say, is this fabric industry, is this fabric store in our best interest as we are automating, as we are social engineering society? And if it's not, well, we can't approve your loan. You don't have enough assets, or we don't think your business model is likely to succeed and it's just too high of a risk for us. They make up whatever bullshit reason they want, but they are the banks controlled by the New World Order, dictating who gets money to run what businesses where. That's control. That is the ultimate control. There are not a lot of people starting businesses with the cash in their back pocket. Have we gotten through 2 sentences? All right, I'm going to have to back it up. It is patently impossible to discuss social engineering or the automation of society, i.e. the engineering of social automation systems, silent weapons, on a national or worldwide scale without implying extensive objectives of social control and destruction of human life, i.e. slavery and genocide. This manual is in itself an analog declaration of intent. Such a writing must be secured from public scrutiny. Otherwise, it might be recognized as a technically formal declaration of domestic war. I told you we are in a state of war, but the American people don't know it, can't see it, won't acknowledge it. They're poisoning the food, the air, the water. I'm not even going to go. Let's get back. Furthermore, whenever any person or group of persons in a position of great power and without full knowledge and consent of the public uses such knowledge and methodologies for economic conquest, it must be understood that a state of domestic warfare exists between said person or group of persons and the public. And these group of persons we're referring to, we collectively call the New World Order. They are at war with you. What happens when somebody's at war and the people they're at war with don't even know they're at war with? Well, then they have the element of surprise. Then they can come up right up behind you and slit your throat, and you never saw it coming. And that's what's happening. That's what people are being led to the slaughter. Literally led to the slaughter. And they're doing it themselves. And they think it's in their best interest. They think it's a good idea. Well, instead of bettering myself and thinking and learning and understanding what's going on, I'm going to just sit here in front of my television and watch some stupid sitcom designed specifically to morally degrade society, destroy the family. I'm going to eat some cheese puffs designed to give you diabetes, make you die just as soon as you get done working at the factory and thinking about retiring. Well, it's time for you to check out. Because you're just cows on a farm. You're cattle on a farm. Well, what does a farmer do when the dairy cow has outlived its usefulness, when it no longer produces milk? Well, it sends it to the slaughterhouse because it can produce meat. But it can only do that once. And I really hope this broadcast reaches new people on YouTube, if I can make another freaking channel. Which I guess they're making me get phone numbers. Every time I need to make a channel, I got to have a phone number in order to verify that I'm somebody else. And I'm not just going to keep buying cell phones and buying cell phones and buying cell phones. I'm just going to get volunteers to give me numbers and text me verification codes. But they're going to get better with the control system, and YouTube's already linking up with Google accounts. So I might not get away with it this time. I might have to get another computer and maybe even create the account on a Wi-Fi connection at Denny's. But I'm going to try to keep this broadcast empty of anything that even might be copyrighted. So let's move on with the document. The solution of today's problems requires an approach which is ruthlessly candid, with no agonizing over religious, moral, or cultural values. In other words, we are evil. We are evil vampires that feed on other people's energy. We use people. We're engineering society so that we gain everything, and the sheeple work for us. Now, when they say you here, they're talking to the people who are in on this. They're talking to the New World Order. You've qualified for this project because of your ability to look at human society with cold objectivity, and yet analyze and discuss your observations and conclusions with others of similar intellectual capacity, without the loss of discretion or humility. Such virtues are exercised in your own best interests. Do not deviate from them. That sounds like a threat. It's like somebody joins the mafia and they're wondering, is Louis over here got what it takes to, shoot somebody in the face, or is he gonna crack at the last second? Do not deviate from our procedures. Historical introduction. And like I said, some of this is going to get pretty technical.
Truth Broadcast Network is not responsible for the content of independent broadcasters. We are loose affiliation of activists bonded together by our common struggle. As such, the network is here to act as a central hub for truth activism. The network is here to aid both those creating content and those searching for it. All broadcasters act independently and they connect through the network. Broadcasters have no control over the network, and the network has no control over them. There is no liability on the part of any broadcaster for any action or statement that is not their own.
And we are back. Let's get the document back on screen, which hopefully you've been on screen all this time, but maybe not. I don't know. So, silent weapons technology has evolved from operations research, a strategic and tactical methodology developed under the military management in England during World War II. So, we're talking about the Trilateral Commission here. The original purpose of operations research was to study the strategic and tactical problems of air and land defense, with the objective of effective use of limited military resources against foreign enemies. In other words, logistics. It was soon recognized by those in positions of power that the same methods might be useful for totally controlling a society, but better tools were necessary. Now, I've mentioned on air before, let me go on screen here. One of the things that I really try to get through to people is that you are controlled through fear. And a very specific example of how this has worked throughout history is during World War II when the German troops dug trenches in the cities in the UK, Britain, whatever it's called, I don't know. They dug trenches around the cities so that the people living in the city saw the military dig in the trench. And of course, jumped to the conclusion, well, we must be under threat of imminent attack because look, the army guys over there are digging trenches. We're on the front lines. Anything to put you in a state of fear. What are they doing now? If you see something, say something. War on terror, war on terror, war on terror. Fear-mongering 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's everywhere. You can't get away from it. You're controlled through fear. So getting back to the document here. Social engineering, the analysis and automation of society, requires the correlation of great amounts of constantly changing economic information or data. So a high-speed computerized data processing system was necessary which could race ahead of the society and predict when society would arrive for capitulation. What is capitulation? What is capitulation? An example of capitulation would be somebody showing up at my door and saying, we're disarming you, we want your guns, and me allowing it to happen. I would have capitulated to their demands. In other words, they are using computers to project ahead of time when the American people will capitulate and allow something to occur. They're not asking you to get out there and dig a trench. They're not asking you to get out there and confiscate people's guns. They're not asking you to get out there and control a drone. The question is, when will you be ready to allow it? When will you, as the American people, capitulate and allow yourselves to be controlled through fear, whether you know the agenda or not? And trust me, there's plenty of people going to the airport, going through TSA, putting their hands up in the air, having other people putting their hand down their pants, and they know it's all a fucking fraud. But they've capitulated. They might as well be standing in a line saying 2 + 2 = 5 because they know it's a lie. But they're still going through the motions, aren't they? Because they've capitulated. This is a caffeinated broadcast. Relay computers were too slow, but the electronic computer invented in 1946 by Presper Eckhardt, J. Presper Eckhardt, and John W. Mauchly filled the bill. The next breakthrough was the development of the simplex method of linear programming in 1947 by the mathematician George B. Danzig. Then in 1948, the transistor invented by J. Bardeen, W. H. Brittain, and W. Shockley promised great expansion of the computer field by reducing space and power requirements. So what we're discussing here, very specifically, is the evolution of the computer industry from nothing to relay computers, which are computers that use magnets to flip a piece of metal back and forth and hold a 1 or a 0. In other words, if the magnet has pulled the metal this way, it completes a circuit, and that'll be known as a 0. And if it goes this way, that completes that circuit, and it'll be known as a 1. It's all 1s and 0s with computers. But in that age of computers, it took a lot of space, it was loud, and it took a lot of electricity, and it was slow. And as computer technology evolved, then you went to the vacuum tube, then you went to the transistor, and things got smaller, they got faster, they got cheaper, and they got using less power. And then, of course, we know where we're at now. I mean, I've got a Samsung Galaxy 3 in here that's more powerful than any of these supercomputers ever were. So with these three inventions under their direction, those in positions of power strongly suspected that it was possible for them to control the whole world with a push of a button. Immediately, of all people, of course, here it is, the Rockefeller Foundation got in on the ground floor by making a 4-year grant to Harvard College, founding the Harvard Economic Research Project for the study of the structure of the American economy. The study of the structure of the American economy. In other words, let me make sure I'm on the right account here. No. Let me log out and make sure I'm on an account somebody can call into if they want. How do you sign out? Okay, there we go. Sign out. And the call-in number is 347-609-0911 or Skype ID truthbroadcastnetwork.com, and we'll have you on air here. So what's going on here? It says the study of the structure of the American economy. In other words, Rockefeller said, well, now that we have these computers, it seems to me like it should be possible for us to get a grip, to get a handle on the whole of the economy. It's not enough for the banks to loan each other money and to loan that out to people running businesses or whatever. They want to know everything. Where is this money ultimately going? How is it transacting? They want to control everything. And how are people controlled? Obviously, they're controlled through fear, but the tool that they use is the money. The tool they use to try and better their life or whatever is the money. And so the study for the structure of the American economy commenced under the Rockefeller Foundation. 1 year later, in 1949, the United States Air Force joined in. In 1952, the grant period terminated, and a high-level meeting of the elite, the New World Order, was held to determine the next phase of social operations research. The Harvard Project had been very fruitful, as is borne out by the publication of some of its results in 1953, suggesting the feasibility of economic or social engineering. So what you see here is a connection between social engineering, economic engineering. We talk often about social engineering, but what does it really mean? How do they get you or me to do what they want us to do? They limit your resources. They limit the options you have at how you can spend your money, where you can spend your money, what you can buy. Consumption is being standardized. You make your own choices, but they present the options that are available to you. You're going to go shopping. Are you going to go to Target? You're going to go to Walmart? You're going to go to the shopping mall that's got a bunch of crap in there? You can't go buy a bike at the shopping mall. If you want a bike, where are you going to go? You're going to go to Target or you're going to go to Walmart? I don't even think there are Kmarts anymore. Now, am I saying the New World Order put Kmart out of business? No, I'm not saying that. But it is in their interest. Look, if you want to control something, you got to centralize it. I can't control 1,000 different things as easy as I can control one main thing, one main umbrella under which 1,000 different things operate. Anyway, we don't want to go into too much detail here. Social engineering is economic engineering. Economic control gives them control of society. Engineered in the last half of the decade in the 40s, the new quiet war machine stood, so to speak, in sparkling gold-plated hardware on the showroom floor by 1954. Now, is that a metaphor? Or was it really a computer standing there? Well, I don't think they would have gold-plated it. So I think that's a metaphor. I think what we're talking about here is the tactical and the literal capability to control society through economic control. That's what we're really talking about here. And they had that ability by 1954. With the creation, look, not just, businesses, Hollywood movies. What movies get made? What movies don't get made? You see what I'm saying? How many authors tried to publish a book and were told by the publisher, well, we'd like to publish your book, but, we don't like these lines here. You need to change this, and that character can't say that. The control systems are everywhere. A person is called an author because they have been authorized by the publisher, controlled by the New World Order. People just don't understand it. They don't understand the degree of control that these people have. It's like they're blind, but they've just been indoctrinated. They've been indoctrinated into the system, and they can't see it for what it is. They accepted the reality that was presented to them since birth. With the creation of the maser in 1954, the promise of unlocking unlimited sources of fusion atomic energy from the heavy hydrogen in seawater and the consequent availability of unlimited social power was a possibility only decades away. The combination was irresistible. The Quiet War was declared by the international elite, the New World Order, at a meeting held in 1954. Now, there's another aspect of this that some people may not want to believe. And maybe I shouldn't even mention it because I'm talking about silent weapons for quiet wars. And I should stick to that topic, but I'm talking about the New World Order. This broadcast is called Death to the New World Order. I am here to expose them and the evil that is controlling them. These things did not just happen, and they didn't engineer economic control for the fun of it. Somebody has a well laid out plan that came into existence long, long ago. That somebody, I would say, is Satan. Evil never dies. It doesn't matter what people are heading up the New World Order. If we were dealing with men, they would die, and this would stop. I run Truth Broadcast Network, and I have no children. And I think daily, well, what's going to happen when I can't do this anymore? I got nobody to pass it on to. And I can't just let the network die.
We would like to thank all who tune in, and especially all who bring others to the network so that we can unplug them from the false reality. Remember, you can show people how to tune in on their cell phones by searching their internet radio application for TBN. Truth Broadcast Network would especially like to thank its tireless broadcasters who sacrifice their time, energy and resources working against the enemy. There is a price to pay for their selfless effort enlightening the world. Thus, we thank broadcasters and ask the audience to be supportive by spreading the word about the live broadcasts and spreading the archives as much as possible.
And we are back. Now, the point I was trying to make is that if the New World Order was only controlled by men, bad men, evil men, a particular family, look, they got enough money. I mean, they could all live for the rest of their lives and all of their descendants. Rich, filthy rich. This isn't about money. They've got all the power they could want. They've got all the land they could want. The Queen of England's got 6,600 acres of land. Or am I getting that wrong? She owns 10 times as much land as the next biggest landowner on Earth. There's only so much money you can have before it's just the numbers don't matter anymore. Anyway, let's get back to the document. Let's get it on screen. The Quiet War was quietly declared by the international elite at a meeting held in 1954. Although the silent weapons system was nearly exposed 13 years later, the evolution of the new weapon system has never suffered any major setbacks. This volume marks the 25th anniversary of the beginning of the Quiet War. Already, this domestic war has had many victories on many fronts throughout the world. So Bill Cooper published this in his book in 1991. This is 2013. And this was published in 79, and it started 25 years before that. But it was found in 86. So 5 years after this was found in an IBM copy machine, Bill Cooper had it published. And of course, he was self-published. He told people if they wanted the book to send him a blank money order. In 1954, it was well recognized by those in positions of authority that it was only a matter of time, only a few decades, before the general public would be able to grasp and upset the cradle of power, for the very elements of the new silent weapon technology were as accessible for a public utopia as they were for providing a private utopia. Now, I know you're saying, well, what does this mean? You don't know what it means. You don't understand it. I'm going to tell you what it means. As I've explained, the silent weapon is economic control. And I don't mean just, okay, you can't have this loan. No, I mean they've got supercomputers laying out the future. And they're orchestrating the economy to proceed along that predetermined path. They can design and engineer the economy to be the way they want it to be. That's why I'm telling you, this collapse we had in 2008 was designed and engineered. You can't make a mistake like that unless you make it on purpose. It's impossible. It's like a plane, okay? If you're flying an airplane and all of a sudden you mess up and you're diving at the ground, what do? Just let go of the controls. And the plane will level out on its own, automatically. The same is true with the economy. The economy is a self-balancing system. You can't take a nosedive like that unless you do it on purpose, unless it is designed and engineered. And of course, we know Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac had everything to do with the housing collapse. Loaning, and I just told you, through the loans. They were loaning people money to buy houses they could never pay back, knowingly. Oh, well, you're poor and you only make $13,000 a year and you want this $300,000 mansion? Yeah, sure. Here's the money. And they did it to how many million freaking people, knowing they couldn't pay it back? And they did the math on it. Ahead of time, they said, we want the economy to collapse in 2008. So all we have to do is start at about, we'll say 2003, loan out X amount of loans to people who can't pay them back. And by this year, all of a sudden the housing market collapses and it'll tank the rest of the economy and take a lot of the world economy down with it. They did it on purpose. You can't do that accidentally. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac that did all of these loans are government programs. Nobody's been held responsible. Nobody's been locked up. Because they did as they were told. So if I need to turn the volume down, somebody just let me know, because I'm not monitoring it, but if I'm too loud, I'll turn it down. Now, this paragraph at the top of the screen that you're not even on, sorry. I'm going to explain this. Because they understood they could pre-plan the economy using the computer technology. They could pave the future they wanted to exist through economic control, thus controlling society. They understood they could do it. to destroy the world, to enslave mankind. They also understood somebody else could get their hands on the same technology and do the exact opposite. And pave a future that was smooth sailing. And that was a problem for them. For the very elements of the new silent weapon technology were as accessible for a public utopia as they were for providing a private utopia. In other words, the New World Order being sinfully wealthy. In other words, we can take all the money, or the public is just going to spread it evenly and have a good life. We can't allow that. The issue of primary concern, that of dominance, revolved around the subject of the energy sciences. Now, you can equate this to slavery. Slavery existed in the United States up to a point, and what did they do? They said, well, we're going to go ahead and emancipate the slaves, but they maintain control. Okay, so you can imagine the panic they had then. Is that how are we going to maintain control if we let the slaves free? And of course, they put things into place in order to maintain control. Things like blacks are not allowed to have guns. Just go on down the list. Anytime something comes about which would allow the people to free themselves and better their lives, the New World Order has to step in and make sure that it doesn't happen. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not one to sit here and say that if it weren't for the New World Order, we would be living in heaven and we'd have a utopia and nobody would ever be hungry. I'm not saying that. I don't know that to be true. I think that there would always be people who would screw it up, honestly. If not people who are controlling the entire world screwing it up. I mean, I'll give an example. There's a girl down south that I practically raised. She was a neighbor girl that had no father. And she's sitting on her front steps one day eating French fries from McDonald's. And along comes somebody that I guess her uncle's girlfriend or something. And just walks past her and just grabs her French fries and walks into the house. Like Amber didn't even exist. She just grabbed her French fries and walked into the house. That's what I'm talking about. It doesn't take some tyrannical New World Order to screw everything up. If they weren't controlling things, somebody else would come along and screw it up too. I don't believe we'll ever have a utopia. But we could at least try if it weren't for the New World Order. Energy is recognized as the key to all activity on Earth. Natural science is the study of the sources and control of natural energy, and social science, theoretically expressed as economics, is the study of the sources and control of social energy. Both are bookkeeping systems, mathematics. Therefore, mathematics is the primary energy science. And the bookkeeper can be king if the public can be kept ignorant of the methodology of the bookkeeping. I'm going to read that one again because it's very important that people understand this. Energy is recognized as the key to all activity on Earth. Natural science is the study of the sources and control of natural energy. And social science, theoretically expressed as economics, is the study of the sources and control of social energy. Both are bookkeeping systems, mathematics. Therefore, mathematics is the primary energy source. And the bookkeeper can be king if the public can be kept ignorant of the methodology of the bookkeeping. Now, this speaks directly to the End the Fed movement. Audit the Fed, end the Fed, stop fractional reserve banking. What's going on there? People just want to know about the bookkeeping. What's going on at the Federal Reserve? How are they controlling our money? How are they manipulating our money? This is exactly what this is talking about. You understand? The Fed is the Federal Reserve Bank. All of the central banks are engaged in fractional reserve banking, and you don't get to see their books. All science is merely a means to an end. This means is knowledge. The ends is control. Beyond this remains only one issue: who will be the beneficiary? In 1954, this was the issue of primary concern. Although the so-called moral issues were raised in the view of the law of natural selection, it was agreed, listen closely, although the so-called, see how they say so-called moral issues? These are evil people. Although the so-called moral issues, they even put it in quotes, moral issues were raised in view of the law of natural selection, i.e., you got to believe in evolution to be as evil as these people are. It was agreed that a nation or a world of people who will not use their intelligence are no better than animals who do not have intelligence. Such people are beasts of burden and stakes on the table by choice and consent. When I say that you are animals on a farm, I don't mean that figuratively. I mean that literally. To these people, you're a dairy cow being milked every day you go to work. Whether you're laying bricks, digging a ditch, whatever you're doing, you're a dairy cow being milked. And right now, they're working to make sure that when you outlive your usefulness, you're ready to go. You're not going to live 30 years after you retire. Back in the day, people retired and they lived a nice old age that started at 40, 50. The rest of their life, they just chilled out and relaxed. That was their leisurely time. People aren't going to be able to do that anymore. They're going to die younger. They're going to work longer and die younger. So now people will work into their 60s. 60s. Some of them will be working into their 70s. You know, an interesting statistic we never hear. What percent of people retire? And what percent of people die before they ever retire? What better definition of slavery is there? If you die without ever having retired from a job, that's slavery, folks.
If all you do is post on Facebook, you are hiding your information from the real world and the real internet. Nothing will ever come up in a search engine. If you want to avoid being censored, blocked or shut down, then post on Truth Broadcast Network. You can then share the professional web pages inside the free speech zone. This way your material will come up in search engines, and it will exist inside and outside the free speech zone. Facebook is a trap. Empower yourself by empowering Truth Broadcast Network. Remember to contact us with your username so we can allow your profile privileges to post.
All right, so we're doing a little better with the network breaks tonight, and I think we're doing better as far as not rolling anything copyrighted. Too bad I don't have a channel to upload this to. I'm going to repeat this paragraph too. This is some crucial stuff. In 1954, this was the issue of primary concern. What? Dominance. 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 Although the so-called moral issues were raised in view of the law of natural selection, it was agreed that a nation or a world of people who will not use their intelligence are no better than animals who do not have intelligence. Such a people are beasts of burden and stakes on the table by choice and consent. This is like me looking at my brother-in-law, who he's actually waking up now, which proves this is not true. But it's like me looking at your common sheeple out there, who's clueless, stupid, brain dead, drooling on themselves, eating potato chips, and watching some stupid TV show. And deciding, well, because this person doesn't use their intelligence, I have the right to use them, to control them, even to kill them and eat them because they don't use their intelligence. That is what these evil people have determined. They have met together. They have conspired, and this is their philosophy. This is their religion. That you are an animal. You are steaks on the table by choice and consent. Consequently, in the interest of future world order peace and tranquility, it was decided to privately wage a quiet war against the American public with an ultimate objective of permanently shifting the natural and social energy, the wealth, of the undisciplined and irresponsible many into the hands of the self-disciplined, responsible, and worthy few. In other words, they're going to take everything. Your land, your money, your wealth, your daughters, everything. They're taking it. Now, it's interesting because I hate to say this, but I'm going to. You look at these people who meet at Bilderberg and these other meetings. I've been to these places. Okay, I've been there with the bullhorn. They're not big, fat slobs. They're not brain-dead morons like your average person out there. And even Bill Cooper said, by and large, they're right. And that's the saddest thing. And people like me, people like you probably, daily we beat our heads up against a wall trying to get it through these people's thick skulls. And they can't understand. They won't listen. And every once in a while, you probably had that little voice in your head say, is this really even worth it? Is the New World Order right? Are these people worthless, useless, not worth the time? Of course, that's a thought that I have very occasionally, and it's just a fleeting thought. But where does that train of thought go? Well, that train of thought would lead you to join the New World Order. And they do come at people with propositions. They came at Aaron Russo, wanted him to join. And of course, when you do that kind of thing, you lose your soul. We won't be able to reach everyone, and we might not even reach 50% of the people. But the way I see it, it's not about getting people to change. It's not about making them join the anti-New World Order movement and become an activist. It's about giving them the opportunity to ever hear the truth, to ever know the truth. Giving them the opportunity to choose. Because they haven't yet. They have accepted the reality that was presented to them. They watch television and they see a show with a gay guy on it, and they think, well, I guess this is just the best entertainment they could make. No, it's not the best entertainment they could make. It's what they want you programmed with. There are shows on television that are just trash. They're no good. They're not funny. They're not interesting. The plot sucks. We have to give people the opportunity to choose between being an animal on a farm and embracing their slavery or becoming free. Everyone deserves the opportunity to strive for freedom in their own lives, in their own right. Financial freedom. Every kind of freedom. They deserve the opportunity, and that's what we're giving them. And frankly, most people will never do it because it's too hard. It's just too hard for them to. The New World Order works hard to make everything comfortable for them. The additives and the chemicals in the food, what's it do? It makes the food addictive. So you're being poisoned, but you love it. Sitting down in front of the television instead of teaching your children the truth about history. It's a lot easier. You can sit down in your basement in front of your television and laugh and pretend you're having a good time. And let your children grow up ignorant. That's the easy thing to do. But is it the right thing to do? Well, this thought doesn't even come into the mind of the sheeple. They're just doing what everybody else does. They're doing what the television's programmed them to do. And it takes you to come along and say, hey, maybe sitting in front of the television isn't the best idea. Maybe you should start looking at the subliminals on the Disney Channel and think about, is that really what's best for your daughter to watch? Maybe you should cancel the cable. Maybe you should shut that shit off forever. Maybe you should stop funding Hollywood by buying DVDs. We have to give them the opportunity, because if somebody like us doesn't come along and tell them, they never know. They literally never know. So even though in the long run it might not seem like the work we're doing is as effective as we would like it to be, on an individual basis, for those who do wake up, for those who do walk away from the ways of this world, we're winning. We're winning. Now let me try and get back to the document here. Again, you can call in. You can Skype truthbroadcastnetwork.com. Literally just search for truthbroadcastnetwork.com on Skype. Or call 347-609-0911. And let me get back to the document here. In order to implement this objective, it was necessary to create, secure, and apply new weapons, which, as it turned out, were a class of weapons so subtle and sophisticated in their principle of operation and public appearance as to earn themselves the name silent weapons. In other words, the way they use supercomputers to control the economy, you don't see it, you don't hear it, you don't smell it, you don't taste it, and you don't feel it. And if you do, I'm going to explain exactly what it's like. It's like this. You're a kid and you have a bike and it has a bar, because you're a boy, from the seat going straight to the steering wheel. And your sister has a bike and hers has a bar. She don't have that bar. It doesn't exist. And so there's a difference between the girl's bike and the boy's bike. And it exemplifies the difference between a boy and a girl. Boys are different than girls. Boys' things are different than girls' things. You understand? But in 2013, you go to buy a bike, and guess what? They're all the same. They're all the same. In 2013, there's so much estrogen in the linings of the canned food that boys are turning into girls. And how did that estrogen get in the canned food? Did somebody wave a magic wand and make that happen? Or did somebody who owned a corporation get told, we're going to give you an extremely good deal on lining for your cans? What is the lining even in there for if it isn't to poison you? Economic control, financial control. In conclusion, the objective of economic research as conducted by the magnates of capital, banking, the banking cartels, and the industries of commodities, goods, and services, the corporations, it is the establishment of an economy which is totally predictable and manipulatable. Manipulatable. In other words, they can design and engineer whatever society they want through the banking system and the corporations controlled by the banking system. In other words, if the corporation doesn't do what the banks want, it doesn't get money from the banks. This isn't rocket science. There's a reason they don't teach you this stuff in the schools. It's because they don't want you to know. In order to achieve a totally predictable economy, the low-class elements of society must be brought under total control, i.e. must be housebroken, trained, and assigned a yoke, a job, and a long-term social duties from a very early age. Long-term social duties from a very early age, before they have the opportunity to question the propriety of the matter. In order to achieve such conformity, the lower class family unit must be disintegrated by a process of increasing preoccupation of the parents and the establishment of government-operated daycare centers for the occupationally orphaned children. I mean, you see how comprehensive, how all-inclusive this plan of theirs is. The quality of education given to the lower class must be of the poorest sort, so that the mote of ignorance isolating the inferior class from the superior class is and remains incomprehensible to the inferior class. With such an initial handicap, even bright lower class individuals have little, if any, hope of extricating themselves from their assigned lot in life. This form of slavery is essential to maintain some measure of social order, peace, and tranquility for the ruling upper class. Now, there's a lot of people who probably think when I talk about a lower class and an upper class, I'm talking about people below the poverty level versus people above the poverty level. That's not what they're talking about here. They're not talking about the difference between the poor and the rich. They're talking about the difference between the rich and the New World Order. You can make $1 million a year. You're still not part of the ruling class. There's still no space for you in their deep underground bunkers. I mean, there's an interview that Zygmunt Brzezinski did with, I don't know what it was.
Truth Broadcast Network may contain copyrighted material, the use of which has not always been specifically authorized by the copyright owner. We make this available in our efforts to advance understanding of criminal justice, political, human rights, economic, scientific, and social justice issues. This constitutes a fair use of any such copyrighted material as provided for in Section 107 of the U.S. Copyright Law. In accordance with Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, the material on this site is distributed without profit to those who have expressed a prior interest in receiving the information.
Well, look at that. We're over an hour into the broadcast, and I haven't played any copyrighted material. Maybe this is doable. You know, it's like I try to make the show professional by throwing things in there, but it doesn't work out when they keep deleting your YouTube channel you upload the broadcast to. Now we're going to get into the descriptive introduction of the silent weapon. Everything that is expected from an ordinary weapon is expected from a silent weapon by its creators, but only its manner of functioning. But only in its manner of functioning. In other words, a silent weapon functions like another kind of weapon. It shoots situations instead of bullets, propelled by data processing instead of a chemical reaction or an explosion like sets off a bullet. Originating from bits of data inside grains of gunpowder instead of grains of gunpowder, from a computer instead of a gun, operated by a computer programmer instead of a marksman, under the orders of a banking magnate instead of a military general. This is some absolutely crucial stuff. So normally you have a man standing there with a gun. I'm not going to pose with the gun for this. I'm not even on camera. So normally you have a man with a gun, and he pulls the trigger. And when he pulls the trigger, the firing pin hits the bullet. And when it hits the bullet, the primer goes off, and that ignites the gunpowder, and that sends the bullet out of the barrel. You understand? That's what normally happens. In this case, instead of a general telling the person to pull the trigger, you have the New World Order controlling the banking cartels, telling them to run simulations in a computer to create a situation in the future. Because that's what we're shooting. Situations. A general tells the computer programmer to use the supercomputer and project and create a future situation. And the computer programmer is the marksman. The computer program creates the situation based on data. It can project into the future what modifications to the current system need to be made to create the new system the New World Order wants. And this is essentially your problem reaction solution. It makes no obvious explosive noise, causes no obvious physical or mental injuries, and does not obviously interfere with anyone's daily social life that they know of, that they recognize. Yet it makes an unmistakable noise, causing unmistakable physical and mental damage, and unmistakably interferes with the daily social life, i.e., unmistakable to a trained observer, one who knows what to look for. Now, if you're not a trained observer, like a member of the New World Order, what does it look like to you? It looks like you go to buy your child a bike, and you look at the bikes, and you're like, these bikes are different than when I was a kid. They weren't shaped like this when I was a kid. The boy's bike and the girl's bike was different. Or you take your kid to Boy Scouts, and they're giving everybody a ribbon. And you're like, well, when I was a kid, they didn't give everybody a ribbon. They just gave the winner a ribbon. You see, these are the changes to our society that have been put into place by the New World Order in order to engineer situations. To the untrained observer, it's just why is this different now? I don't know. Oh, well, guess that's just the way it is. I'll go home and watch TV. That's what it is to the untrained observer. To the person in the New World Order, they understand what they're doing. And to somebody like me, I look at it and I'm like, yep, see, here it is. Here's their agenda it's gender bending, creating the boys and the girls to be just the same. That's why you got all your shows on TV that all have gay actors. They want to androgynize the male and the female. And this is getting deep. It's getting advanced into the future as far as what they're trying to do, and I shouldn't go into it in this broadcast. The public cannot comprehend this weapon and therefore cannot believe that they are being attacked and subdued by a weapon, just like you on YouTube are saying this guy is nuts. They want to make the male and the female the same. That's crazy. Even though you know there's estrogen in the fucking can liners that's bringing down male sterility. You know there's BPA in all the plastic that's bringing down sterility. You know girls are maturing early because all the hormones in the milk. You know they're messing with us in 100 different ways. You'll still deny that there's any large agenda there. Even though I'm reading you this government document saying there's a large agenda here. The public cannot comprehend this weapon and therefore cannot believe they're being attacked and subdued by a weapon because it's not a gun. It doesn't go bang. Just like, why do you think they keep making new movies about slavery every couple of years? Because they've got to have you viewing slavery as a black man in chains. That's the only slavery that exists. There's no other kind of slavery. That way, when you're a fucking slave, you don't see it for what it is. When you see slaves, you don't see it for what it is. Because all you think of when you see slavery is a black man in chains. All you think of when you think of the word weapon is a rifle shooting a bullet. The public might instinctively feel that something is wrong, but that's because of the technical nature of the silent weapon. They cannot express their feeling in a rational way or handle the problem with intelligence. Therefore, they do not know how to cry for help and do not know how to associate with others to defend themselves against it. I mean, I gotta hand it to these people. They're fucking brilliant. I hate the New World Order, and I want to kill them. This broadcast is called Death to the New World Order. But they're fucking brilliant. We're up against some brilliant people. Make no mistake about it. And remember, this document was wrote in 1979. What's that, 50? Let's see. 89, 99, 2009. 35 years ago. This document is almost as old as I am. When a silent weapon is applied gradually, the public adjusts, adapts to its presence, and learns to tolerate its encroachment on their lives until the pressure, psychological via economic, becomes too great and they crack up. Therefore, the silent weapon is a type of biological warfare. It attacks the vitality, the options, and the mobility of the individuals of a society by knowing, understanding, manipulating, and attacking their sources of natural and social energy and their physical, mental, and emotional strengths and weaknesses. Now you see there the word options. This is what I mean when I say consumption is being standardized. And you see that line in the movie THX 1138. Why is consumption being standardized? Well, in order to have greater control, in order to exercise greater control over you and over society, they can't give you 1,000 options because then you can choose what you want. So consumption is standardized. There's fewer options. That way they channel you into one of the options they want you to take. And we see this everywhere. It used to be if you wanted something, you went to the what they call it, the ma and pa shop on your local street, in your local town where things are made there. But again, when you go shopping now, it's Target or Walmart. Maybe you got a Kmart. I don't know. Maybe they still exist. There's like just a handful of places to go, and that's it. And they're all corporate. They're all standardized. I mean, you go into one McDonald's, you've been into all the McDonald's. Not that anybody should even be going there. And that's the whole point in standardizing consumption. So you can't say, hey, I'm going to go eat over here. They have healthy food. Now, there are some places popping up who have allegedly healthy food. But if you want fast food, you're getting poison, period. Anyway, again, I don't want to go off on a tangent too much. This document is probably going to take me a couple more days to cover because I want to do... This may end up being a 6 or an 8 hour broadcast. But it needs to be covered right. It needs to be covered well. And I will see that it is. Unless somebody shoots up a fucking mall or something Monday. Therefore, the silent weapon is a type of biological warfare. It attacks the vitality, options, and mobility of individuals of a society by knowing, understanding, and manipulating and attacking their sources of natural and social energy and their physical, mental, and emotional strengths and weaknesses. A lot in that paragraph. This document's not massive, but it says a lot with a few words. Theoretical introduction. And of course, we've all heard this. Give me control over a nation's currency, and I care not who makes its laws. And that is Meyer Amschel Rothschild, 1743 to 1812. Today's silent weapons technology is an outgrowth. Remember, we're reading government publication here. Silent weapons for quiet wars. Today's silent weapons technology is an outgrowth of a simple idea discovered, succinctly expressed, and effectively applied by the quoted Rothschild. Mr. Rothschild discovered the missing passive component of economic theory known as economic inductance. He, of course, did not think of his discovery in these 20th century terms, and to be sure, mathematical analysis had to wait for the Second Industrial Revolution, the rise of the theory of mechanics and electronics, and finally the invention of the electronic computer before it could be effectively applied in the control of the world economy. So you see how they were dependent upon the computer age. You can print all the money in the world, but if you can't track where it's going, you can't control society. They needed to be able to track every transaction. That's what they're doing. That's why when you go to a grocery store now, you got to get some stupid card for that grocery store to get all the discounts. What are they doing? They know what bubble gum you bought. They know what popcorn you eat. They know what potato chips you're eating. They know everything. This is all a part of the silent weapons for quiet wars. They have to know every single transaction that's made. If a penny is spent, they're tracking it. And that's how they perfect their control. In the study of energy systems, there always appears three elementary concepts. These are potential energy, kinetic energy, and energy dissipation. And corresponding to these concepts, there are three idealized, essential, pure physical counterparts called passive components. Now I imagine we're going to lose people. We're going to lose people here. But I'm going to plow forward for the ones that are bright enough to actually keep watching. In the science of physical mechanics, the phenomenon of potential energy is associated with a physical property called elasticity or stiffness and can be...
Truth Broadcast Network is not responsible for the content of independent broadcasters. We are loose affiliation of activists bonded together by our common struggle. As such, the network is here to act as a central hub for truth activism. The network is here to aid both those creating content and those searching for it. All broadcasters act independently and they connect through the network. Broadcasters have no control over the network and the network has no control over them. There is no liability on the part of any broadcaster for any action or statement that is not their own.
All right, now I see Festy in the chat throwing links in there, and one of them that fluorescent lights cause cancer, and this is one of the obvious things. I mean, not only are they're sterilizing the population through goods, commodities, the chemicals, the additives, and things that are injected in our I mean, for instance, I run in Florida when I lived in Florida, and I'll be running in summer here with a Camelback, and it's a tiny backpack with 2 liters of water in a plastic bag on your back. And I need to stop doing that, but you can't run 15 miles in extreme heat without water. They're using the economy, the economic system, to give us diseases, to sterilize us, to give us cancer. Anyway, in the science of physical mechanics, the phenomena of potential energy is associated with a physical property called elasticity or stiffness and can be represented by a stretched spring. In electronic science, potential energy is stored in a capacitor instead of a spring. This property is called capacitance instead of elasticity or stiffness. In the science of physical mechanics, the phenomena of kinetic energy is associated with a physical property called inertia or mass and can be represented by a mass or flywheel in motion. In electronic science, kinetic energy is stored in an inductor in a magnetic field instead of a mass. This property is called inductance instead of inertia. In the science of physical mechanics, the phenomena of energy dissipation is associated with a physical property called friction or resistance and can be represented by a dash point, a dash pot, or other device which converts energy into heat. In electronic science, dissipation of energy is performed by an element called either a resistor or a conductor. The term resistor being the one generally used to describe a more ideal device, it's like a wire, employed to convey electronic energy efficiently from one location to another. The property of a resistor or conductor is measured as either resistance or conductance reciprocals. In economics, these three energy concepts are associated with economic capacitance, economic conductance, and economic inductance. I told you this is going to get a little bit complicated. But if you want to understand how they control the world, these are the things you need to understand. Economic capacitance is like capital, money, stock, inventory, investments in buildings and durables. That is economic capacitance. Economic conductance, goods, production flow coefficients. It is the widgets made. Economic inductance, services. So you have goods and you have services. Economic inductance is services, the influence of the population of industry on output. All of the mathematical theory developed in the study of one energy system, like mechanics, electronics, etc., can be immediately applied in the study of any other energy system, like economics. Mr. Rothschild's energy discovery. What Mr. Rothschild had discovered was the basic principle of power, influence, and control over people, as applied to economics. That principle is, when you assume the appearance of power, people soon give it to you. When you assume the appearance of power, people soon give it to you. Mr. Rothschild had discovered that currency or deposit loan accounts had the required appearance of power that could be used to induce people. Inductance with people corresponding to a magnetic field into surrendering their wealth in exchange for a promise of greater wealth instead of real compensation. They would put up real collateral in exchange for a loan of promissory notes. Mr. Rothschild found that he could issue more notes than he had backing for, so long as he had someone's stock of gold as a persuader to show his customers. What we're talking about here is fractional reserve banking. That is, well, I've got some M&Ms here. Let's do a demonstration. So here I have a bowl of M&Ms. We'll call this the bank, okay? And I want more M&Ms. Fractional reserve banking is a bitch, but I'll give it a try. So what I do is I take a bunch of M&Ms and I loan them out, okay? And then people pay me back payments, an M&M here or there, for payments. And what I don't tell people is that I've loaned out almost all the M&Ms. Almost all the M&Ms are gone. There's no gold in the bank. And I lie to everybody, and I pretend that I'm loaded with M&Ms. I'm Rothschild. I got M&Ms up to here. I'll cut you a loan. Fractional reserve banking is complicated, but that's a half-decent introduction to it. Let's see. Mr. Rothschild loaned his promissory notes to individual and to governments. These would create overconfidence. A promissory note basically is worthless. It's a promise to pay. Then he would make money scarce, tighten control of the system, and collect the collateral through the obligation of contracts. The cycle was then repeated. These pressures could be used to ignite a war. Then he would control the availability of currency to determine who would win the war. In other words, well, I want this side to win, so I'm not going to loan that side money to buy tanks or airplanes. You understand? That government which agreed to give him control of its economic system got the loans. So it's just like I told you. The bank says, well, we just can't approve your loan. It doesn't seem to me like you're likely to win the war and pay us back, so I can't approve your loan. Meanwhile, I'm loaning money to the side I want to win to beat you, because they gave me control over their economic system. Now, we have Federal Reserve Bank in America. And who won World War I and World War II? You see? Collections of debts was guaranteed by economic aid to the enemy of the debtor. Collection of debts was guaranteed by economic aid to the enemy of the debtor. The profit derived from this economic methodology made Mr. Rothschild all the more able to expand his wealth. He found that the public greed would allow currency to be printed by government order beyond the limits, the inflation, of backing in precious metal or the production of goods and services. If there is one document you could print out that would really open someone's eyes, if they had brains enough to read it, if they cared enough to read it, this would have to be it. Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. Apparent capital as paper inductor. And what is an inductor? Let's scroll back up for a moment. Economic inductance. Services. So, apparent capital as paper services. In this structure, credit presented as pure element called currency. Credit presented as a pure element called currency has the appearance of capital but is in effect negative capital. Hence, it has the appearance of service but is in fact indebtedness or debt. It is therefore an economic inductance instead of an economic capacitance, and if balanced in no other way, will be balanced by the negation of population. And if balanced in no other way, will be balanced by the negation of population, war, and genocide. So what this sentence is essentially saying is that if and when a nation goes into too much debt, the people will die. Through engineered wars, engineered genocide. The total goods and services represent real capital called the gross national product, and currency may be printed up to this level and still represent economic capacitance. But currency printed beyond this level is subtractive, represents the introduction of economic inductance, and constitutes notes of indebtedness. War is therefore the balancing of the system by killing the true creditors, the public, which we have taught to exchange true value for inflated currency, and falling back on whatever is left of the resources of nature and regeneration of those resources. Mr. Rothschild had discovered that currency gave him the power to rearrange the economic structure to his own advantage, to shift economic inductance to those economic positions which would encourage the greatest economic stability and oscillation. I know this is complex. I know it's complex, and I wish that I could put these things in simpler words, but quite frankly, I'm struggling to understand this myself. The final key to economic control had to wait until there was sufficient data and high-speed computing equipment to keep close watch on the economic oscillations created by price shocking and excess paper energy credits, paper inductance / inflation. So at this point in time, hour 40 minutes into the broadcast, I think it's time we had a little break. All right, folks. I know that music was a little harsh there, but I had to have a break. And that song is apparently called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, so that's kind of how things work on the internet. Everything's there, but it might not be what's quite appropriate. So we're going back on screen now, continuing with Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. And I guess I'll just move us closer instead of turning the volume up. The aviation field provided the greatest evolution in economic engineering by way of the mathematical theory of shock testing. In this process, a projectile is fired from an airframe on the ground, and the impulse of the recoil is monitored by vibration transducers connected to the airframe and wired to chart recorders. By studying the echoes or reflections of the recoil impulse in the airframe, it is possible to discover the critical vibrations in the structure of the airframe, which either vibrations of the engine or aeroline vibrations of the wings, or a combination of the two, might reinforce, resulting in a resonant self-destruction of the airframe in flight as an aircraft. Now, I thought I was the king of the run-on sentence, but these guys are doing pretty good themselves. You know, every time I do a post on the network, you got to do search engine optimization. In other words, I want this crap to be found. And it's like, well, we're not going to give you very high search results because your sentences are too long. In other words, I got to dumb it down and dumb it down and dumb it down to get Google to give me decent search results, because the people reading it's point blank saying, people can't read this. Your sentences are too long. It's too hard to read. But you see how they write. But I guess we are in a process of having to dumb down the information because the target audience, no offense to anybody listening live or watching on YouTube, but our target audience is the sheeple. It is the brainwashed masses that we're trying to reach. And perhaps that's why they really want to use these run-on sentences. It's a deliberate effort to make sure that it is impossible for you to understand this information. When you receive information, the impact that it has on you depends on whether or not you understand it, as much as whether the information is shocking. You can have the most shocking information on the face of the earth, but if you don't fully understand it, it doesn't mean anything to you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is about the most shocking information on the face of the earth, and you got to come to understand it. From the standpoint of engineering, this means that the strengths and weaknesses of the structure of the airframe in terms of vibrational energy can be discovered and manipulated. How does this relate to silent weapons for quiet wars? Well, they're probably getting ready to tell you. I haven't read this document. But they are conducting a shock test to find out, can the aircraft take this kind of shock, or is it going to fall apart? They do the same thing with your economy using a supercomputer. And they did. They projected everything they did with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to cause the housing collapse before they did it real world. And they said, yes, it successfully collapsed the economy. Let's do it. Yeah. Welcome to the New World Order. Applications in economics. To use this method of airframe shock testing in economic engineering, the prices of commodities are shocked. Commodities like houses. What caused the housing collapse? People couldn't afford their houses. Houses got repossessed. There was a surge of new houses on the markets, and housing prices fell. The prices of commodities are shocked, and the public consumer reaction is monitored. The resulting echoes of the economic shock are interpreted theoretically by computers, and the psychoeconomic structure of the economy is thus discovered. It is by this process that partial, differential, and difference matrices are discovered that define the family household and make possible its evaluation as an economic industry, disparative consumer structure. This is both simple and complicated at the same time. And I don't know about you, but by going over this, I'm reaching new understandings as to how they are controlling the world that will no doubt show themselves in future broadcasts. Then the response of the household to future shocks can be predicted and manipulated, and society becomes a well-regulated animal with its reins under the control of a sophisticated computer-regulated social engine energy bookkeeping system. Eventually, every individual element of the structure comes under computer control through a knowledge of personal preferences. Personal preferences. That's why you got your Giant Eagle card or your whatever grocery store card you got. Such as knowledge guaranteed by the Computer Association, consumer preferences, UPC, zebra stripe pricing codes on packages. Now, bear in mind, this, again, was published in 1979. Now they've got the RFID. They've got everything in the computer. I mean, they have a lot more control than they had then. And, of course, they have way more advanced computers to project the future of the economic system. In other words, they can run simulations on the economy, thousands, millions, billions of times a second, and see what the economy does if this happens. What's the economy do if that happens? You think before 9/11 they didn't run simulations to see what would happen to the economy? Of course they did. And they ran simulations based on, okay, we carry out the false flag attack successfully and nobody catches on. What happens to the economy? We carry out the false flag and we get caught. And people know what happens to the economy. You understand what they're doing here? We carry out the attack and only 5% of the people know what happens to the economy. We carry out the attack and only 10% of the people know what happens to the economy. We carry out the attack and nobody knows. But 10 years later, everybody wakes up. What happens to the economy then? And they simulate it all in a computer. So anyway, we're going to skip down to the economic model because that information is outdated. The economic model, the Harvard Economic Research Project, 1948 to present, was an extension of World War II operations research, again, the Trilateral Commission. Its purpose was to discover the science of controlling an economy, the science of controlling an economy, at first the American economy and then the world. It was felt that with sufficient mathematical foundation and data, it would be nearly as easy to predict and control the trend of an economy as to predict and control the trajectory of a projectile. Such has proven to be the case, and let me explain why. If you're talking about one person, that one person may deviate from the projection and may do things unexpected, and your model will completely collapse. But when you're talking about hundreds of millions of people, it all averages out. That's why it's so accurate. Such has proven to be the case. Moreover, the economy has been transformed into a guided missile on target. And they set the target. The immediate aim of the Harvard project was to discover the economic structure, what forces change that structure, how the behavior of the structure can be predicted, and how it can be manipulated. What was needed was a well-organized knowledge of the mathematical structures and interrelationships of investment, production, distribution, and consumption. To make a short story of it all, it was discovered that an economy obeyed the same laws as electricity, and that all of the mathematical theory and practical and computer know-how developed for the economic field, for the electronic field, could be directly applied to the study of economics. This discovery was not openly declared, and its more subtle implications were and are kept a closely guarded secret. For example, that in an economic model, human life is measured in dollars. and that the electric spark generated when opening a switch connected to an active inductor is mathematically analogous to the initiation of war. The greatest hurdle which theoretical economists face was the accurate description of the household as an industry. This is a challenge because consumer purchases are a matter of choice, which is in turn influenced by income, price, and other economic factors. This hurdle was cleared in an indirect and statistical approximate way by an application of shock testing to determine the current characteristics called current technical coefficients of a household industry. If you don't understand what I'm saying, what they're saying is your household is an industry. It's treated as an industry in their economic models and their computer simulations. Finally, because problems in the theoretical electronics can be translated very easily into problems of theoretical electronics and the solution translated back again, it follows that only a book of language translation and concept definition needed to be written for economics. The remainder could be gotten from standard works on mathematics and electronics. This makes the publication of books on advanced economics unnecessary and greatly simplifies project security. Now, I told you this was going to get complicated. Fortunately, we're not going to come across the hardcore complicated stuff like you're beginning to see here until Monday. Monday, you better show up ready to think, because we're all going to be struggling Monday. We're all going to struggle Monday. I'm out for the night. Death to the New World Order.